The age-old riddle of all riddles, which came first, the chicken or the egg, is relatively simple to answer as the question about the evolution of birth in animals. Egg laying almost certainly came before live birth.
Literally uses his hind legs and will brush them off to keep algae and mold off them that could hurt the babies.
The first example being the armored fish that inhabited the oceans 500 million years ago and were ancestral to all land vertebrates seem to have laid eggs. But the rest of the story is far from straightforward. No two eggs are the same. They come in a multitude of different shapes, sizes, colors, and sometimes laying eggs is quite the process. Sometimes these oddball animals giving birth can be frightening. Other times, exciting. Just you wait to see how these eggs get laid. About reproduction of red vine snakes. But what they do know is it's a known fact that females lay eggs, usually about 6 to 10, that hatch after an incubation period of around 100 days. The thumbnail indicates that the red snake has 2 batches in her care, a maturing group of young and a fresh batch ready to hatch. So that's a busy mommy red vine snake. The vine snake is mildly venomous, but it's not fatal for humans. It usually just induces slight numbness or tingling sensations, but it may occasionally trigger a severe allergic reaction.
It's a serious hemotoxin.
Yeah, if you are bitten by one of these, it's blood transfusions.
This snake originates from Central and South America, where it's widely distributed and lives among dense branches of the trees. This snake is widely distributed and abundant in its native habitat. It's not on the list of endangered animals. Vine snakes rely on camouflage, neck inflation, and their venomous fangs for hunting and protection. Because of their coloration, they easily blend into the surrounding foliage where they capture lizards, frogs, and birds. Perhaps the most fascinating thing about giant water bugs is the way they care for their offspring. The female deposits her eggs on the mate's back. The male giant water bug is tasked with caring for the eggs until they hatch in 1 to 2 weeks. During this time, he protects them from predators and regularly brings them to the surface for oxygen. He'll also move to stir up the water around his body, keeping it oxygenated. In other species, the mated female deposits her eggs on aquatic vegetation above the waterline, but males still play a role in their care. The male will usually stay submerged near the plant stem and will periodically climb out of the water and wet the eggs with water from his body. If you happen to scoop up a giant water bug in a net while exploring your local pond, don't be fooled. They also play dead. That dead water bug might just wake up and bite you. Giant water bugs can deliver a painful, though non-toxic bite between the toes of unsuspecting human feet. This explains one of their common names, toe biter. Before the babies are born, the male and female seahorse come together repeatedly every morning to dance together to reinforce their pair bond, says a marine biologist at the University of British Columbia. They change color as they move together, sometimes with tails entwined. The female transfers her pear-shaped eggs into the male's brood pouch, which has walls that provide maximum surface area, so every embryo can embed in its soft tissue. As the embryos take up more room, the pouch begins to stretch, more like the belly of a very pregnant human. One male seahorse produces over 1,500 offspring, and his pouch has only about a half tablespoon in volume. Shortly after the males give birth to tiny, fully independent offspring, the female has already got her eggs ready to go, and they mate again right away. Scientists found that seahorse pregnancy is incredibly complex. More than 3,000 different genes are involved. They even discovered genes allowing seahorse fathers to provide nutrients to their developing embryos. And Father of the Year goes to, it's full when looking after the children, but this fish has his mouth crammed full with scores of his offspring. Among jawfish, which are mouth brooders, it's the male that takes responsibility for looking after the eggs until they hatch. After courtship, the male fertilizes the eggs and then collects them in his mouth, protecting them until they hatch, at which point the fry swims off to fend for themselves. During this period, the male cannot feed, meaning mouth-brooding fish are underweight by the time the eggs hatch. Once the eggs have hatched, the fish will spend a period of time feeding and recuperating. Jawfishes belong to a very unique club whose membership merely requires them to play the role traditionally assumed by the mother. Egg-carrying strategies that males employ include eggs that are kept inside brood pouches, eggs that may be attached to the underside of the belly, or eggs that are retained in their mouth. Upon hatching, the juveniles usually remain in the same area as their parents, but receive no further parental care. Tough love, Easter egg hunt, Instead, he'll have to venture into rocky reefs or kelp forests off the California coast for Santa Barbara southward, where California horn sharks generally lay their corkscrewed packages, also called egg cases. About 43% of sharks and rays, and the 9 species of horn shark, lay eggs rather than give birth to live young. California horn sharks lay about 2 every 10 to 14 days or so during the spring and summer, and each contains 1 little embryo. The eggs hatch in 6 to 9 months, and the color and texture of the eggs serve to camouflage them as they rest among the debris and rubble of the bottom. Most species of sharks give birth to live young. However, approximately 30% of shark species lay eggs, so the process is very unusual to experience. 2 local species, the horn shark and the swell shark, are egg layers. Female horn sharks lay 2 egg cases once every 10 to 14 days between February and April. It lays an egg that can weigh up to a quarter of its body mass. Proportionately, this is by far the largest of any bird in the world. Imagine a chicken laying a 1-pound egg, or more graphically, a human giving birth to a fully formed 4-year-old. That's a big baby. An adaptation so bizarre is like a magnet for evolutionary biologists, and a slew of ideas about how the petite bird ended up with such a ginormous egg. The prevailing theory about how the kiwi got its egg has got to be wrong. Kiwis aren't an evolutionary accident. They're just reproducing more like mammals than like birds. Mammals give birth to live young, often at a late enough stage in development that their babies are largely self-sufficient. Humans are a notable exception. We come out half-baked and helpless. Birds don't. They lay eggs, and even once they hatch, the babies are fragile balls of scraggly fluff. Kiwi babies pop out mostly ready for prime time, though, ready to run around and evade predators on their own. The parents skip town pretty much immediately. Hatching is fascinating and truly adorable. Like tiny eyeballs and sacs attached to a rock, these little larvae wiggle and wobble in the water's currents. With some help from their father, as seen with a specialized infrared camera, their wobbles help them get free to grow. This brilliant footage, filmed in the Philippines, shows how a male and female saddleback clownfish fan their eggs with their mouths and fins to keep them oxygenated and clean while they grow. Clownfish, like many reef fish, have evolved to hatch after dusk to avoid the threat of being eaten. Newly hatched baby clownfish, like most coral reef fish, are small and transparent. Hatching in darkness likely means they're less visible to predators as they emerge from their eggs. When spawning regularly, the clownfish spawned about every 10 to 14 days. The clownfish eggs hatch between 8 and 10 days after being laid. A female clownfish will lay between 100 and 1,500 eggs approximately every 2 weeks. A lot of work for these fishy little clownfish. Like really close, under her actual skin close. Yeah, the female Suriname toad holds her eggs in holes in her back until they're ready to hatch. After implantation, the eggs sink into the skin and form pockets over a period of several days, eventually taking on the appearance of a pus-filled irregular honeycomb. The embryos develop through to the tadpole stage inside these pockets. When the eggs are ready to hatch, the babies begin to punch their hands through the holes until they're able to make their way through. In a short amount of time, up to 100 fully formed toads will come out of their mother's skin. Once they've emerged from their mother's back, the toads begin a largely solitary life. After giving birth to the new toads, the mother slowly sheds the thin layer of skin that was used to birth them and can begin the cycle again. This method allows the offspring to head out and find their own food immediately after birth, and they'll not require any further care from their mother. Suriname toads live in the waters of tropical rainforests in South America. And why robin eggs are blue. The color of an eggshell is determined by pigments deposited as the shell is formed inside the bird. The shell is formed just before the egg is laid. The biopigment biliverdin is responsible for blue tones in bird eggs. The coloration can range from bright, bold blue or blue-green to pale ice blue and every shade in between. Smaller eggs and those laid first in a brood are usually more intensely colored than larger eggs or those laid later in the nesting cycle. In addition to coloring eggshells, this pigment is also responsible for blue tones in moth and butterfly wings and is the same pigment that makes bruises turn bluish-green. Eggshell pigments and color patterns reveal a lot about where a bird nests and the sort of evolutionary challenges it faces before it hatches. And indeed, there are a number of hypotheses that explain eggshell pigmentation. The most widely accepted are either camouflage or protection from sunlight. What's that song? Don't It Make My Brown Egg Eating puts a capsule which contains his sperm into the reproductive tract of the female. The female mantis, after mating, starts swelling, and then her abdomen is going to become extremely fat. Also, she'll stop flying and eat a lot. She lays eggs on twigs, buildings, plant stems, rocks, fence posts, or any other rigid surface that can bear her weight. The female mantises die around 2 weeks after they lay their eggs. It usually takes 3 to 6 months before the young praying mantis hatch. Egg cases begin to hatch during the spring season after 2 to 3 weeks of high temperatures. It is possible that they can hatch all at one time or over a period of multiple weeks. The mantis nymphs measure only about 1/8 of an inch in length and can be difficult to see. Also, they're going to molt many times and become full-sized in a wind, especially when it takes 53 months for the eggs to hatch. The giant Pacific octopus covers the eggs, defends them, and needs to gently waft currents over them so that they can get a constant supply of fresh, oxygenated water.
On her behavior in both tending the eggs and in protecting them.
And she does this continuously, never leaving, never eating. Exhausting, right? Many octopus mothers, such as the giant Pacific octopus, are known to lay eggs only once in their lives. They guard and care diligently for the eggs, all the while losing weight and weakening due to a lack of food. The mothers often die soon after the eggs hatch, essentially sacrificing themselves for the success of their new octo babies. Now, scientists have figured out why this grim scenario happens. It has to do with the optic gland between the octopus's eyes, a gland similar to the pituitary gland in humans. Researchers removed this gland and found that the octopus's mother instincts disappeared. She abandoned her eggs, started feeding again, and went to live a much longer life. Smallish, turkey-like bird known for its colorful, smooth, glossy eggs. But exactly how great tenemus produce their positively alien-looking eggs has largely been a mystery until now. The first thing discovered was that the tenemu eggs were iridescent. They change color slightly depending on what angle you're looking at them from. The color of the tenemu's eggs is due to the interplay between pigment coloration and what's known as nanostructure coloration. Eggs normally get their hue from a naturally occurring pigment that gives them a flat color. Underneath their iridescent coating, tenemu's eggs are a regular old shade of blue. A tenemu female lays several eggs which the male incubates while the female departs to seek another mate. Large species will lay one egg every 3 to 4 days, while the smaller one lay on consecutive days. The females lay eggs in multiple nests throughout the nesting season too, and eggs are relatively large compared to the max. Female snails will produce around 100 eggs, but some species can have up to 400. These eggs are tiny and they'll be dropped into moist soil and covered. Snail eggs hatch between 2 and 4 weeks after being laid, of course assuming they've been fertilized. If fish are not eating the eggs, eggs are milky and soft when first laid, hardening and changing color in the first few hours. The shell of the snail develops as an embryo inside its egg. Under favorable conditions, eggs hatch after approximately 2 weeks to 1 month, and snails emerge with a soft shell. Therefore, they need to feed themselves to get calcium, and the first source to get it is by consuming the remains of their egg and even other eggs that have not yet hatched. Even with so many eggs produced, only a fraction of these snails reach maturity. Many of the eggs are washed away by rain or water or even eaten by predators, despite the outer protective layer and being resistant to cold and heat. Even humans take them, which are known as white caviar or snail caviar, a delicacy around the world.